All right, there's a bunch of crazy explosive situations around the world right now, a bunch of situations that the Western media is not talking about at all. But first, I want to mention that the world almost saw the birth of a brand new country last night. The radical left wing gangs of Portland declared an autonomous zone. Now, the mayor of Portland is Ted Wheeler, and he's been the best friend that Antifa has ever had. He's constantly protecting them, constantly defending them. They riot all the time. He orders the police to stand down and allow them to riot. Whenever Antifa or other left-wing extremists are ever charged with a felony, he personally intervenes and makes sure that they get just nothing plea deals where they plead guilty to a misdemeanor and they get a few hours of community service. Well, in the middle of the night, all these guys go out into the Pearl District of Portland, yell and scream and chant and erect barriers and take chalk and draw lines in the street and write border, even though they supposedly hate borders and say that all borders are racist. Here's the thing. Ted Wheeler lives in the Pearl District in a condo. They declared their autonomous zone right outside of his condo complex. So instead of protecting the left-wing gangs, Ted Wheeler immediately calls in the police and has the area cleared out. Crews immediately arrive with trucks. They pick up all of the trash that Antifa left behind, haul it away. And then Ted Wheeler gave a statement to the media denouncing the so-called autonomous zone or occupied protest, depending on which faction you're talking to. He denounced it in Seattle. He basically said that the CHOP, aka the Chaz, is exactly what the right wing has been saying it is.
But what I'm hearing coming out of Seattle concerns me. Armed people walking around in the autonomous zone, people being asked to show their papers and demonstrate where they're from at the entrance to the autonomous zone, businesses potentially being shaken down to be allowed to operate within the autonomous zone. So if you're asking if that's something I support, let me be unequivocally clear. I absolutely do not support that.
Now, this is the same mayor that publicly supported the occupied protest outside of an immigrations and customs enforcement headquarters in Portland back in 2018. Basically, they camped out along some railroad tracks, and Ted Wheeler publicly supported them until eventually the encampment got so disgusting that it was declared a major biohazard and was cleared out, and it cost the city like 30 grand to clean up all the human waste and all the needles left behind by junkies and all kinds of other stuff. Okay, next I want to talk about Kashmir. So for decades and decades, India and Pakistan have been fighting over Kashmir. There's violence all the time. It's ongoing. In fact, just yesterday, Pakistan accused India of killing some civilians. The Pakistani intelligence agency has for decades inserted jihadists into the areas controlled by India where they carry out terrorist attacks. However, some of you may not even know that there's also a big beef between India and China in Kashmir. Now, they fought a month-long war in Kashmir in the early 60s, but there hasn't been any bloodshed between India and China since 1975. Well, that ended June 15th. So initially, it was claimed by India that a colonel and 2 infantrymen died in some kind of conflict with China. And then there was all kinds of rumors that the death toll was actually much higher. Now, China has still not confirmed anything, but the government of India now says that the death toll is 20 people and about 15, 16 other people, very seriously injured. And there's an alleged Chinese army communication intercept that's being passed around that states 46 members of the Chinese army were either killed or seriously injured. But China's not actually admitting to anything. Although China has commented that it was all India's fault. And of course, India blames China. But here's the thing. There was no live fire. None of these people were killed by bullets. So I guess for quite a while now, as a show of good faith, the Indian and Chinese troops along what they call the line of actual control, because they each claim overlapping territory. And then they have an agreed upon line of control. And they patrol this without guns as a show of good faith. Well, apparently there was some kind of standoff. The Indian government is claiming that a member of the Chinese infantry threw a rock and hit their colonel in the head with a rock. And this is a colonel that died. And then absolute savagery broke out, apparently, because everyone that died from being beaten with rocks and police batons. I mean, this must have been an unbelievable scene straight out of a Hollywood movie. So what's happening now is both sides, China and India, are both massing all kinds of military assets on their borders with each other. And not just in Kashmir, everywhere where China and India share a border, there's a buildup of military assets right now. And China has released propaganda videos showing large-scale military maneuvers in Kashmir with, giant surface-to-surface missiles, live fire, the whole works. All right, next I want to talk about North Korea. The North Korean government just conducted a controlled demolition of a big office building right on the border with South Korea. Now, this building had a title like the Inter-Korean Exchange, and it's where people from South Korea and North Korea would get together to discuss issues and resolve conflicts. And so the big demand of North Korea right now is that they want the South Korean government to stop people from tying leaflets to balloons and floating them over the North Korean border. And 3 days before this building was demolished, the sister of the North Korean dictator said that if South Korea doesn't put an end to these leaflet balloons, then this building will be destroyed. And they destroyed it. And now they're threatening to go back on a deal made in 2018 and put armed troops back in certain places along the border where they have previously been pulled out. And there's a whole other side thing here, because they're also demanding that Western governments cease and desist their alleged interference in Hong Kong, which they probably are interfering, but to me that suggests that China has just unleashed North Korea again, because I believe that, China is the one pulling the strings. China tells North Korea when they're allowed to be bad and when they have to behave themselves. And because of what's going on in Hong Kong, China just gave North Korea a green light to be bad again. All right, I've been talking about what's going on in Libya. I don't think there's any question now. The GNA government of Libya, this is the entity that controls a large area now in the northwest of the country. It's propped up by the Muslim Brotherhood as well as other Islamist and Salafist militias. Well, I don't think there's any question it's becoming a protectorate of Turkey. Turkey is moving in big time. There's now Turkish troops on the ground. There's Turkish warships at the ports. Turkey is building 2 permanent bases as well as using their airports. Turkish companies are moving in and taking over the infrastructure and the oil fields. This is basically a big power grab by Turkey. So one of the big developments now is Turkey has made some kind of deal with the current left-wing government of Italy. And the Italian Navy and the Turkish Navy are conducting joint military patrols in the Mediterranean right now. And some mine clearing teams from the Italian army have arrived in GNA territory. Meanwhile, France is a supporter of the LNA, along with Russia, Egypt, and a bunch of other Arab countries. The French government is now alleging that the Turkish Navy has conducted aggressive actions against French ships. And NATO has actually opened an investigation into this. Not that they'll ever do anything, but there's an official investigation now. But basically, Egypt and the Arab League and Russia and, of course, America, France, and a lot of other countries are all calling for a ceasefire. Turkey is currently says they're open to a ceasefire, but they don't want a ceasefire until they can take control of what's called the oil crescent. In other words, they want the GNA to take possession of a lot more oil infrastructure and oil fields before they agree to a ceasefire. All right, thanks for watching this video. Click the like button, post a comment below, and tell me what you think about this. And please consider making a donation to this YouTube channel, as YouTube has mass demonetized all of my videos. And I would like to thank Sarah, Charlotte, and Jonathan for making donations. Thank you very much. And click the subscribe button. New video every few days.